Amen. So I was going to preach on something from my devotions. Most of my preachers, by the way, come from my devotions. Even if we're doing a series or we're going through a book or whatever it is, I believe strongly in preaching, hopefully revelation, not just information, not just knowledge, but my understanding of the preaching of the word is that whatever we preach needs to bring transformation, needs to bring change. It needs to bring something where the people can say, yes. As the word challenges, there needs to be something where we can respond to and say, we need to go forward. Ultimately, the preaching of the word should draw us closer to Jesus. And so in my devotions this week, I had the great privilege of reading about David and Goliath again. The danger with stories like that is you can just fob them off because we know them so well, especially if you've kind of grown up in church. But I got so much from it, and I was going to preach on that. I'm not going to anymore, but you're probably wondering what this yellow mark is. This is what my preach was going to be about. Goliath was that size. In fact, if you could put that picture up as well, you'll see a guy up there, that guy over there. That guy is around Goliath's size. He's just under 9 foot. The chap on the right is the size of an average man. And look how big Goliath is. This guy lived in the early 1900s, died at a young age as far as I know. And that's more or less how big Goliath was. And what I wanted to speak about was actually holding the head of Goliath as a victory. And the story goes when David killed Goliath, he took a sword, he cut off his head. I mean, that's quite gruesome. So picture this, he cuts the guy's head off. It wasn't like a doctor would do, in surgery. It was with a sword. So it was messy. There was stuff hanging. And it was gruesome. And that guy's head must be quite big. So I just picture this young boy, David, having cut the Goliath's head off, and he goes before Saul. He presents this token, this victory, slayed the giant. And he's probably holding him by his hair like this. This, rugged, dynamic young man, and he presents it to Saul as a victory, as a token of defeat. We've defeated the enemy. And that's what I wanted to talk about, but things changed as the week went on. But they kind of line up anyway, because God wants us to defeat our Goliaths. He wants us to get victory where we're not getting victory. And so, if there was a new title, sorry Joe, I've totally messed up all your slides and all of that, but there are no slides because things changed late in the week. But if there was a title to this, it would be a mature church. That's what I want to talk to you about, as being a mature church. And I want us to look at 3 scriptures, and I want to tell you a story. Thanks, babe. So, because there are no slides, you have to open your Bibles today. So if you've got your Bibles here, Hebrews chapter 6 and Hebrews chapter 5. We'll look at 2 scriptures from each of those. Hebrews 6, 1 and 2, and Hebrews 5, 12 and 14. I hope you value your Bibles. Imagine not having them. Hebrews 6, 1 and 2. The writer of Hebrews says, therefore let us leave the elementary doctrine of Christ, elementary, the basics. He's saying, guys, move on from the basics and go on to maturity. There's the word maturity. Not laying again a foundation, and he lists what the basics of Christianity are. All these things I'm about to read now are basics. This is entry-level stuff. He's saying, get beyond this. Repentance from dead works, faith toward God, instructions about washings or baptisms. By the way, if you've never been through the waters of baptism, what are you waiting for? That's a basic entry-level doctrine that we shouldn't need to wrestle with. If you are born again, the next thing is baptism. You might say, well, I'm waiting for my life to come right. It doesn't make sense. It's like we always are a work in progress. And so, if you haven't been baptized, I encourage you to be. The laying on of hands, the resurrection of the dead, eternal judgment. The writer's saying, move on from that stuff now. Move on. And verse 5, chapter 5, verse 12 and 14 is kind of linked to that. He says, this is about, where he talks about the milk and the meat. He's saying, by this time you ought to be teachers. But you need someone to teach you the elementary truths of God's Word all over again. He's saying, guys, you should be way beyond this basic stuff. You should actually not be the one who's just sitting and taking it all in and just living on milk. But you should be at a place where what God has taught you, you should be instructing others. He says you need milk, not solid food. But solid food is for the mature, who by constant use have trained themselves to distinguish good from evil. The Lord wants the church to mature. The more mature the church is, the more impact we have on the world. The more immature we remain, it's funny, when we're not growing in our walk with God, what happens is we become quite self-consumed and self-absorbed. And so God wants a mature church, and that's what I want to talk to you about this morning, is what that could look like. If you flip to 1 Chronicles 12, please, verse 8, will be an introduction to my story. 1 Chronicles 12:8. This is the story of David after he defeated Goliath. Saul got very jealous, which is what happens when we're immature. Jealousy comes from immaturity, by the way. It comes from not having our roots plugged into our identity in God. And Saul's struggling with this jealousy, and he's trying to kill David, and David's running for his life. And while he's running, people hear about this mighty warrior. This is the guy, this is the young guy who held Saul's head and presented Goliath's head and presented the head to Saul. This is the warrior. This is the champion. This is the guy who said, Saul has slain his hundreds, but David has slain his thousands. This is him. And they all started flocking to him and say, we want to be in your army. We want you to be king. We want you to lead us. And look at the type of people that he attracted. Verse 8 of 1 Chronicles 12. From the Gadites, that's a tribe, there went over to David at the stronghold in the wilderness mighty and experienced warriors. These are the kinds of people that he attracted. Expert with shield and spear. This was their thing, was war. And their faces were like the faces of lions, and who were swift or quick as gazelles upon the mountains. Gazelles, in our context, would be like a springbok. He's saying these guys are vicious on the one hand. It's like this face of lion. They're fearless, but at the same time they're quick and they just go-getters. But what struck me when I read this week was when it talks about being expert with shield and spear. And for me, maturity is linked into this, because it reminds me of that portion in Ephesians 6 that talks about the armor of God. Remember that? Where Paul says, put on the whole armor, and he lists the armor. He's using metaphorically what a soldier would dress in preparation for battle. And a few of the what would be put on for armor in those times was a sword, which is similar to the spear here, a shield, a breastplate to protect the heart. And when I read that, I thought, I'm seeing a parallel here. These guys were expert in operating the spear and the shield. And I think as the church, we've got to become good at handling the sword or the spear and the shield. The sword is used to attack. It's the Word of God. It's becoming comfortable in our identity in God, in knowing the Scriptures. It's staying free from sin in many ways. The spear or the sword. The shield is used actually as a protection. It's almost a second protection to protect you from an arrow going into your heart. Because most of the rest of the body was protected. Those guys would have these helmets, difficult for anything to penetrate. But if an arrow got past the shield and hit the breastplate at the wrong place, it could have penetrated the heart. And I would like to suggest that maturity has to do with issues of the heart. And we've got to get used to not only using the sword to live this victorious Christian life, but at the same time, actually protecting the most important part of our lives, and that's the heart. These are where the issues of the heart is where everything comes from. This is where maturity comes from. This has to do with motives. It has to do with integrity. It has to do with giving up everything for God to be used by Him. It comes from the heart. And so as I go through some practical things, maybe keep that picture in mind. We're talking about the shield. Lord, help me to become experienced with the spear or the sword, but also, Lord, to service issues of the heart, so that we make it right to the end as Christians, doing well. And with that, I would like to introduce my story, or our story. We recently had the privilege of going away on holiday. And surprise, surprise, we went to Kruger. We spent 5 nights at Pretorius Corp, and it was just a really special time, Gracie, myself, and Cheryl. And one of the days we decided to go from Pretorius Corp and up to Satara and back. So it was a long day's drive, and we prepared for it. And kind of between Pretorius Corp and Lower Sabi, as you veer off to go up to Satara, we came across a lion sighting, and it was just a really special sighting. These lions were in the road, and if you picture the lion over here, the lions, and there's a row of cars looking at them, and on the left-hand side, and then on the right-hand side is another row. You know what it's like at those things. Everyone's just kind of... And so there's 2 rows with the lions in front of us, and we see a car coming from Lower Sabi towards us, thinking, we've got to now go from the middle row into the left row so this guy can pass. So what you do in Kruger is you're optimistic. That's what you do there. It's like, everyone's there to see stuff, so if you've got to, pull in front of someone else, you just assume they're going to let you in. That's how I do it. It's like, we're all there for the same reason. We love seeing animals, so it's, sure, of course you can come in front of me. So I kind of get ready to go in front of the car on my left, and this guy was so cross with me. No, I didn't bump him. I didn't cut him off. I was just being presumptuous. And I think that's a good thing. That's how you see animals. So Cheryl said, babe, that looks cross with you. He's done this with his arms up. So I said, I don't really care. Honestly, I don't think I was being rude. I was just doing what you do in the Kruger. So we kind of going, and how did we do it? We're going like this, and he's on this side, and he pulls back while we're slowly moving forward, and I'm still trying to go in like this, and suddenly we hear this. He comes next to us on the passenger side, and he takes his bumper and he scratches our car on purpose. This is called Kruger road rage. That's how it happens. And just because he was cross, because I was being a bit presumptuous, he comes and he's literally scratching the car. And then just at Cheryl's door, at the passenger door, the range is there, you can have a look at it. He does a little bit more of a coop like this, and his tire, you can see the tire mark on the door, and then our mirror goes coop. His mirror flaps our mirror back, and, it just carries on as though nothing's wrong, just looking at the lines. And I'm thinking, what a chop. Like, how does that happen? Look what he's just done. Cheryl opens the window. Cheryl and Grace, check the car. So, what my response was? I wanted to smack him. I'm just being honest. How can you do that? If the lion weren't there, I think I might have. No, I'm not an aggressive man, don't worry. But in my mind, I thought, I would love to just put this hand on your face and just gently, tell you that you're a chop. All these thoughts started coming into my mind, and then I thought, okay, relax, Veltman. Just relax. It's just a car. It's just a car. So what I thought I'd do is just, say something to him and then forget about it. So we eventually passed him. I said, why did you do that? I said, sir, if this is how you handle conflict, I want to say to you, it's very immature. And I got that out, and I felt so good having said that. And do you know what else I wanted to say to him? I'm just confessing all my bad stuff here. Because it has to do with the preach. I wanted to say to him, and I nearly did, and I'm so glad I didn't. I wanted to say to him, because now it's like I was confident in the fact that I was composed, and I was actually quite proud of the fact that that was my response, if I'm honest. And I'm using this, Gracie at the back, I'm using this as a teaching point. You know, Gracie, this is how we handle conflict. But I'm thinking, maybe I should go again and say to him, I feel so sorry for your wife living with a guy like you. That's what went through my mind. But it gets worse. Cheryl says, she says, babe, please go up to the window again. Go up to his window because I've got something to say to him. I'm saying, at that point, babes, please don't do it. Let's just leave it right there. Because so far, so good. But it gets better. We then get up to Chikwani, to the picnic site. And as true as Bob, his car's there. And I'm thinking, this is awesome. I've forgiven him. Gracie, I've forgiven him. I just want to tell you, this is how you handle conflict. I didn't smack him. I've forgiven him. But I said, I want to go find the head ranger and let him come and talk to them. So Gracie said, Dad, please don't make a scene. Dad, please, just leave it there. I said, my babe, I've forgiven him. But the Bible says we're not doormats. And so justice needs to be served here. So Gracie, oh, there goes Dad again. So I go to a ranger at Chikwani and I say, can I speak to the head ranger, please? He says, he's at his house at the back. She said, would you like me to take you there? I said, I'd love you to take me there. Hops in the car with me, go to the guy's house. He's a big guy. And he's got his camo outfit on. And he's got his shotgun over his shoulder and he's got some bullets in his belt here. And this oak's ready. He's actually going to go and take out an elephant that had been injured, sadly, by a vehicle. And he was going to hop into the chopper, which he did straight after our little chat. Going to hop in the chopper and go and do what he needed to do as a ranger. Told him the story. He says, I can't believe that guy would do that. He looks at the car. He says, I've got to kick him out the park and he will never be allowed back. He'll be blacklisted. So I'm thinking, that's awesome. Oh, that's about right. Teach this guy a lesson. But I've forgiven him. Justice must be served. So he hops into my car because he needed to go get into the chopper anyway at the picnic site. And we go and find this guy. Now I'm thinking, oh, this is so amazing. Because now he's going to, I've done what I can. Now the ranger will do the rest. So he goes to the guy. He says, can I have a chat with you? And he says, I believe you went into this gentleman's vehicle. He says, no. This guy said to him, he went into my vehicle. So he lied out his teeth. He just said, no, sir, hold on. This guy is lying to you. He pushed in front of me, and it was his fault, not mine. So he went into my vehicle. So the ranger says, well, why didn't you report it? He said, no, I didn't need to report it. Anyway, bottom line is he lied. And the ranger said, there's nothing more he can do. Said to me afterwards, I know what's going on here. I can't help you, though. This needs to be done by the police. Going to open the case. So, and he got into the chopper and flew away. And I'm thinking, I still thought I'd handle this thing really, really well. Seriously. And then, this week in my devotions, somehow the incident came back into my mind. And I felt the Lord say to me, you didn't handle that well, boy. I read something in the scriptures that spoke about fathers in the faith and how actually every believer is called to be not just a son, but to be a father or a mother in the faith. Even if you are a brand new Christian here, God wants you to still have that same heart. The heart of a father is to serve, is to allow others to come through. You stand back so that others can come through. That's the heart of a father. And I felt the Lord say, God, you're doing well in spiritual areas, in shepherding and the way that you love people. I felt him commend me for that. But I felt him say, emotionally, you've got some work to do. And it was like a rebuke, but such a loving rebuke. And it started a journey. My response was, Lord, you're right. I can see it. Thank you for pointing that out to me. And so me and the Lord are on a journey right now of how to handle conflict better. And I want to talk to you a little bit about, as I'm on a journey, maybe just some ways that we as a church can just constantly be looking at our own lives and say, Lord, are there any areas that we need to mature in? Because the more mature the church is, like I said, the more impact we can have. And so, if I had to ask you, what does it look like to be an all-rounded father or mother in the faith? Here's some thoughts. And I've taken a whole bunch of words with the letter R. I don't normally do that, but I just had fun doing that. An all-rounded father happens, or that process happens, when I start giving up certain things. Here's all the R's. I give up my rights. When I said yes to Jesus, I gave up my rights. I don't have the right anymore to act in the flesh, to rant and rave. I personally don't think there's much merit in Christians standing with these placards, coming against other thoughts, where we stand and we deal with that stuff by doing the same thing back. Fighting for our rights as Christians. I find that stuff never helps. Being an all-rounded father, the process happens when I give up things like rightness, wanting to be right all the time. It's a sign of immaturity. Where I feel like I have to have the last say all the time. I interrupt people because I think my story is better than theirs. I don't like being wrong. I don't like being corrected. Resisting, there's the R again, resisting correction. Correction in the church, when it comes in a biblical way, when someone comes and speaks into our life and suggests that we need to work in an area, it's actually very, very precious. It's not a negative thing. When someone loves you enough to pluck up the courage and say, I love you, but that area is concerning me. And the Bible speaks about that. The wound of a friend can be trusted. And the wisdom that comes from counselors, from people around us. But when we're immature and we're still needing milk, that stuff becomes a threat to us. We don't like being corrected. What about recognition? I start giving up recognition as I grow in my understanding of being a father. I don't need to be recognized. I'm not doing things to gain attention. Respect is another one. I'm wanting respect. The more I grow in my walk with God, the more people need to respect me. And we start to value things like dignity. Now, dignity is okay, but someone said this. Let me just find it here quickly. We either have great faith or dignity. We can't have both. What they're saying is, if your reputation is more important than obeying God, then we're immature. If what we're after is dignity, we want respect, we want people to recognize what we do, it's difficult to have that with great faith. They're in competition with each other. And as fathers, we lay these things down. What about reaping? Another R. It's another sign of immaturity. Where all I want to do is reap. The principle of sowing and reaping is actually it's a biblical principle. It's in the Bible. And the principle is this: you take some seed and you scatter it, which should be the heart of a father and the heart of a mother and the heart of a believer, is we want to see life wherever we go. We're throwing seeds. We're leaking the Lord. We're just letting His presence come out of us. And so the sowing is wonderful. But if we put more emphasis on the reaping than we do the sowing, then we're immature. Can you see that? If our primary target is just so that we can have, so that everything must come my way, and it's protection, and I'm sowing, but I'm sowing so that I can reap. It's all about what I'm going to get back. It's a sign of immaturity. There's some other signs of immaturity as well, some more R's. Revenge. I know all about that from my story in Kruger. My mind's going to one or two other things. What about rebellion? It's another sign of immaturity. Sometimes as Christians we can get rebellious. Rebellion is, if God's going in this direction, and we kind of feel the need to be different. The need to maybe stand out. They need to always challenge. Always that person who is just challenging the status quo. I guess in many ways it's like the fish swimming upstream. Now the fish swimming upstream, if it's done righteously, is a wonderful thing. Because sometimes as Christians we need to swim upstream when everyone else is going the wrong way. But sometimes we do that just because we can. We make a scene about things that we don't need to. It's like we always want to take the rules and challenge them. It's a rebellion thing. It's a sign of immaturity. What about retaliation? Tit for tat. Or resisting correction, as I've mentioned. These are all areas that, as we've just read from Hebrews, where Paul's saying, let's get beyond that stuff. Let's get beyond the elementary stuff. And let's start fighting these battles and winning victories in these areas. One of the greatest subtle traps, I think, in the church right now, in my observation, is a term we don't hear much of, but it's called reservation. Reservation. And reservation means, the dictionary's description of it, is to keep back, to withhold, to keep something for oneself, to retain, to be self-restrained. Now these things aren't necessarily bad, but if we live in this place that everything we do is around that stuff, it's like living in a house with these, you got a Gauteng now, and you see these massive walls that protect houses. Now I understand why people do that, but sometimes spiritually we do the same thing. We build these massive walls around us, and we say to people, this far and no further. I'll give you this amount of time and no more. I go to work, and work is for my future. And I come and I look after my family because it's my family. It's all about my world. And I'm seeing with something of the struggle that's happening in our world right now, and we all know just some of the challenges out there so strong that if we don't watch this stuff, it slowly starts to filter into the church. It becomes a me gospel. It's all about what I can get. And the me gospel actually is very dangerous. It becomes everything on my terms. And we forget the act of the cross. That Jesus came and gave himself up for us so that we can ultimately serve him. He didn't come only to meet our needs. He came so that we can lay down our lives in response to his amazing sacrifice and to say, everything I do is for you. You're the boss, not me. You're the master, not me. I must come in line with where you're taking me. These for me are all signs of areas that we need to grow in so that we can become more effective. If I look at some of my own challenges over the years, and I trace them back to something, almost always it goes back to the issue of identity. When I'm fighting these battles and I want to be right, and I like what happened in the Kruger, that this anger that starts to well up, what I've noticed in myself is that stuff normally happens when I'm not aware of who I am in Christ. About 18 months ago, I didn't tell the story in the first service, but I want to tell it now. We were on holiday in Scottsboro, actually, and we stayed in a friend's house, probably 4 or 5 houses down from where we used to live. And so when we lived there, I used to walk our suburb flat. I just love walking. I love walking at night. Often late at night, I would be Mr. Security. I was always out, and I just loved it. And I remembered some of the challenges that I went through when I lived there. And one of the evenings I went for a stroll again, and I stood in front of a house, and I remembered the good memories. I said, oh God, those were such wonderful memories, thank you. But I also remembered the bad ones. And I carried on walking, and suddenly I felt the Lord drop these 2 words into my spirit that had been transformational for me. He said to me, Guy, you are significant, and you are strong. It might not mean much to you, but it was a furthering of this understanding of my identity that God was working on. It was almost like I was at a place, I was in front of our house, memories flooded back, and remembering what God had done and some of the things that had happened in my life. It was just right for God to speak those words at that time. It's called Rhema words. Revelation. Do you know what I mean? Sometimes God says something to you, it's like, if He said that to someone else, it would mean nothing, but it's changed my thinking. And He said to me, you're significant, boy. And you're strong. What He was doing was strengthening my identity as a man of God. And He was reminding me how He thinks of me, what He thinks of me. All these struggles of immaturity that we have point to that stuff. The more we allow God to speak these truths over our lives, as we read the Bible and we meditate on it, and then we hear Him say things, we get the sense, God's saying this, it brings maturity. And I'd like to suggest this morning that God is constantly working at causing our identity to become more and more secure as sons and daughters. Because that's where maturity comes from, when I discover who I am. Do you know that everything that the devil throws at us focuses on destroying our identity? It's what happened in the beginning in the garden. When Satan tempted Eve, he was dealing with that very thing. If God is who He says He is, ... He wanted them to question their identity in Him as a son or a daughter. Even Jesus' temptation. If you are the Son of God, if you are who you say you are, it's an identity issue. Everything seems to come, in my understanding, the more I look at this thing, it's all, at least 95% of stuff comes out of this. The issue of fear often is an identity issue. Do you know that the most frequent command in the Bible is fear not? It's the thing that's said the most in terms of commands. Fear not, do not be afraid. Why? Because that's often our trip up. What I fear replaces who I trust. It's an identity issue. If God is here and I fear, it's almost like I place my fear above Him. It's like saying, I need to worry about this stuff more than what I think God can do. It's an identity issue. What I fear replaces who I trust, and lack of trust is a sign of unbelief. And unbelief always produces lack in our walk with God. Unbelief is saying, it's impossible for God to come through in this situation. It's an identity issue. It's saying, I know He's my Father and I know He's good, but in this case, I need to do all the work. You know what prayer is? Prayer is when you take an issue, it can plague you, it can be devastating, and you take this issue, and it's like you hold it in your hands, and you put it in His hands, and you say, Lord, everything in me wants to fight this battle, but you know better. You're the Father, I'm the Son. I'm going to take this issue of fear, and I'm going to put it there, and I'm going to leave it there. That's what prayer is. Prayer is an exchange. It's the divine exchange. It's taking my stuff and putting it on Him, which is what happened at the cross. That's what He wants us to do. And then He wants us to leave it there and trust Him enough to be such an amazing Father that He takes it and then He fights my battles for me. That's the relationship He's after. But when I don't know who I am, it's the strangest thing. It feels like we need to fight the battle ourselves. Can anyone relate to this? Like sometimes I think, I've just been through a situation, and actually, I did a whole lot of striving there. It's almost like I didn't trust God enough to fight for me, so I had to do it myself. It's an issue of identity. As a son, it's almost like I know better than the Father. What about forgiveness? Forgiveness is when the object of pain is replaced by my object. Sorry, let me say that again. Forgiveness is when the object of pain is replaced by my object of praise. That doesn't make sense, does it? Don't worry about that comment I've just made. Someone said this: the part of healing a wound comes when you allow yourself to feel the pain and pass through the pain. I love that. It's like, it's okay to go through the challenges. We can't pretend that they're not there. We feel the pain, but we can't stop at feeling the pain, because a lot of Christians live here. They're angry. And it's like God saying, feel the pain. It is what it is. But now walk through it. And the walking through it is an issue of identity. We work this through with the Lord and we say, Lord, everything in me wants to do this thing on my own. Everything in me wants to go to that man and give him a fat smack. But I choose to lay that thing down. This stuff is stuff. This stuff is stuff. This stuff is tough. third time lucky. You know, getting victory over the big stumbling blocks in our lives. I put the in my notes here, the in capitals, the big stumbling blocks. What are your big stumbling blocks? I know what mine are. And what I've learned to get over the big stumbling blocks, if there's anything that's going to derail me, I know what they are. And you probably know what yours are. What I've discovered is, if I'm going to win these battles so that I can mature in my faith, I've got to stay there until I get victory. When God spoke those words and He said to me, Guy, you're significant and you're strong. He was strengthening my faith as a man of God. He was putting something in me, a building block that I needed, that when I felt insecure, when my identity was challenged, I sometimes say those words over myself, sometimes 3, 4, 5 times a day, 18 months later. Last night I went for a stroll around our property and I was praying for this morning. But you know what I was praying for? I was praying into these issues. Lord, you said to me 18 months ago, I'm significant and strong. And as I preach tomorrow, Lord, as I bring your word, I'm asking you to give me an authority as a son. So that what I say is not my words, but your words, and I'm asking that my words would bring freedom to people. And then I would revisit those words that he said, you're significant and strong. This is the conversation I had last night. Lord, you said to me, I'm significant. And as a son, I want to remind myself today, I'm significant. Not because of Guy Veltman, but because of what Jesus has done. And I could feel, as I was just speaking that over my life, like I do so often, I could feel courage come and strength come as God is working these things into my heart. I'm significant and strong. But you know how it comes? It comes from revisiting it over and over and over. In fact, Joel 3, I think it is, let the weak say I am strong. There's something in declaring it until we believe it. How do we get through the big issues, the trip-ups that keep pushing us back? We declare it over and over and over. And eventually, when you declare it enough, you start believing it. And then you're just reminding yourself. Is this making sense? Love is finally accepted when I surrender. When I surrender, that's when I understand love more. Because the striving is what causes me to lose ground. Striving is a sign of unbelief. I've got to do it. I've got to work hard. It's all about me. And I push God aside. Someone once said, in intensity, simplify. In intensity, simplify. When there's intense stuff that's happening in your heart, that's not a time to be intense. It's a time to simplify your life. It meant so much to me when I heard that. When you're under intense struggles and battles, it's not a time to be overly intense. It's a time to go and do what you love doing. This journey with God is so real. He's so practical. He wants to give us handles so that we can become mature. In landing, we can't hear God when we're anxious. And back to the story of the shield and the spear. Lord, teach us where we are tripping up. Teach us where we're struggling. To be able to use both well in war. To not only know how to fight, and not only know how to, get victory in certain areas, but teach us these issues of heart that cause us to grow in our maturity. May we become people, Lord, who others can lean on at any time. It's almost like we learn to dig our own wells as fathers and mothers in the faith. We lean on others around us, but we learn to dig our own wells. We learn to take these things and to wrestle them through and to find victory because we begin to discover who He is. Amen. Can you come up, Leon, please? Lord, help us to mature in these areas. I want to pray for us as we land. And what we did in this first service, I'm going to do it again. I'm going to simply ask that if God, I'm hoping that all of us would have got something from this morning, but sometimes God uses the word it's almost like a turning point where God specifically just focuses on something and says, that's what I'm saying to you. He highlights something and we know that we've got to deal with it. And in a few minutes, I'm going to ask you to stand if God has highlighted something around this stuff that you just know God's saying, service that thing. Like He did with me, Guy. I want you to grow this muscle of maturity emotionally. If God's saying that to you right now, like He's put His finger on something. Often God says something over and over and over because we're not listening. And for some of you, it might be, I've heard that before. He's told me that before. It's almost like it's time to deal with it. If the Lord has put His finger on something and you know that you need to respond, would you please stand? Thank you, Lord. Let's pray. Lord, we come to you as children today. I just thank you for the simplicity of a child, Lord. Simplicity of their understanding. It's not complicated. And you said, Lord, unless we come like children, we can't inherit the kingdom of God. And we come like that now. We put aside all our technicalities, all the complications around stuff that we're dealing with. And we come like a child and we run. We throw ourselves onto you, onto your lap. We snuggle up close, Lord. And I ask you by the power of the Holy Spirit, Lord, help us to mature in areas where we need to. I feel like some of you, God is wanting to take a sting out. If you picture a bee sting, that sting needs to come out in order for healing to come. I feel like the Lord wants to do that today, to remove the sting of maybe unforgiveness, fear, even something that happened some time back, perhaps even a trauma of sorts. We've got to move on from that stuff. If that's you, maybe just put your hands out in front of you like this, and I'm going to pray now that the Lord would remove that sting of defeat. That's your Achilles. and brings freedom. Lord, I ask now by the power of the Holy Spirit that you would remove the sting that would hold people back here, Lord. Trauma, unforgiveness, fear, and anything else. Holy Spirit, I ask that you remove that from them now. And give us courage as a church to be overcomers. To be like David with Goliath, to defeat our giants. In Jesus' name. Amen. You can take a seat. Thanks. If you're here this morning and you do not know Jesus as your Savior, you might know about Him, but He's never become real to you. Perhaps you did once know Him, but you just drifted in your walk with Him. And it feels like the invitation is there, which it is. God's saying, come home. I want to pray for you in a minute. What you're saying to Him, if you do respond, is you're saying, Lord, I'm giving you my life, and I'm laying down my rights. Everything that I have, I'm laying it down, and you can say what you like and do what you like. If that's you, and you want to give your life to Him, either to recommit or for the first time, I'm going to ask you to be bold and to stand on your feet so that we can pray with you. If you want to become a follower of Jesus, would you stand, please? Okay. Lord, as we go into this week, as we go into prayer meeting tonight, as we get ready for Alpha, as we do life, may we do it with such confidence as sons and daughters of God. Help us to become mature. We're open to that process in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's end with a song.